self-determination, once a year in November, I do a planning session. And if you haven't gone to it, it's recorded on and available on our website, and we'll be doing it in November. But what it's about is really looking at your future and figuring out how do you get there. And I look at self-determination as one of the tools in your arsenal. And usually during that session, I show this slide. This is a slide I built that kind of talks about the life journey that we go through and some of the different challenges that we come up with. For some people, it's getting the original diagnosis. Healthcare is one that we go through several times, because when you age and turn 26, then all of a sudden you need to do some special things at work to stay on your parents' healthcare. Or maybe you get SSI and now you're dealing with Medi-Cal, et cetera. So healthcare continues to be something that you deal with periodically. Government, there's a lot of really good government agencies and programs that you may want to take advantage of. So you can see there's a lot of different challenges or opportunities that you need to take advantage of. And each one can be challenging and complex, sometimes costly, and definitely resource intensive. And part of the reason for being a part of this group is really to learn from, I'm a second child, so I'm always learning from my sister. I don't try to make the same mistakes she makes. And I'm always teaching my younger sister so that she's able to learn from me. And in a sense, a support group gives you kind of that family way of learning from each other. So I say that things can be costly, and self-determination is a great way to help fund some of the resources that you might need to help you with your challenges. So I like to focus on my son, Josh. Josh is now 32. He was diagnosed just before he turned 4. He did ABA starting at 4. Back then we called it LOVAS. He graduated from high school in 2010 from Woodbridge. He went to IVC, graduated in 2015. His focus was dance. Then he went to Cal State Fullerton, and he graduated with a BA in television and film. He moved into our condo that we bought in the 2008 downturn. He moved there during COVID in August 2020 because our house started shrinking as we were all locked down. And then during that program, during COVID, he started a program called AFA Hub, which is a regional center paid tailor-made program that focuses on film, animation, game design. And so he completed that on April 30th of this year. During this year, I was working on the Autism and Entertainment Conference, and he worked on 2 documentaries. And then he started a PIP in May, working with Home and Yonder, who is run by Paul Hemstreet, who is our video manager for the Autism and Entertainment Work Group. Josh, after over a dozen years of being on the wait list, started Section 8 housing in January, and he started self-determination in June. And it's not a coincidence that he started self-determination in June, because I didn't want self-determination to start while he was in the AFA Hub program. Why? Because AFA Hub was a vendored program through Regional Center, and they wouldn't take self-determination money. So I had to coordinate the conclusion of that. But the good thing was also that by him participating in AFA Hub, he received the budget that he would have gotten from AFA Hub moving forward into self-determination. Now you're going to learn a lot about self-determination tonight, and I think of it as a tool. I showed the little hammer here, but it's a tool for helping to fund and work on problems or growth opportunities that you may not have the funds to do, but through self-determination, you can use your regional center budget and use that in a way to implement programs for yourself or your child. So for Josh, one thing is health. He gained 20 pounds during COVID, I think, at least. So he's got some weight issues. So we're using self-determination money. He has a trainer that he's working out with, and he's working out with them twice a week. And then we've hired my brother to do cooking lessons with him once a week. And so yesterday they worked, they made meatloaf, they've made some Japanese dishes, they made all sorts of different kinds of things. And he's learning how to cook and feeling more comfortable cooking. So that's like one thing that we were able to do with our self-determination budget. The second thing is he graduated from AFA Hub. He's graduated from Cal State Fullerton. He's kind of in a PIP, but I don't feel like he's quite career ready. There's some skills he needs to learn, some executive functioning skills that he needs to learn, some film editing skills he needs to learn because he wants to be a film editor. So we have some self-determination money that's being spent on mentoring in film editing. So he's working with a film editor and also working with Zavicon, getting ready for employment. Josh is not the neatest person in the world. And so his house is kind of a mess, and because he was so focused on school, I should talk, my office is a disaster, but he has some cleaning services to help him with that. And then I found a declutterer who he's going to be working with, who actually has a son on the spectrum who is also a film editor. So I'm really excited when he's going to start working with Nancy Collins on decluttering. His social skills and kind of dealing with some of that. He has a counselor that he's working with, and we're using some funds for technology to help with paying for his cell phone and internet. So as you can see, self-determination money can be spent on resources that can help you put together a more customized plan for your needs. And what's different is normally when you work with the regional center, that though every vendor you need to work with has to be vendorized by regional center and tends to have programming that fits in exactly to kind of a regional center mode and may not be exactly who or what you're looking for. So this gives you the ability to implement it in a way that's more person-centered. And we're really, really lucky today to have two wonderful people joining us who are both influential in my journey with Josh to implement self-determination. We have Christine Tolbert from the State Council of Developmental Disabilities. Christine and I have known each other for years, and last month we had Linda O'Neill talk about the local partnership, the Orange County Local Partnership Agreement. And if you haven't seen it, that video of Linda is on our website and it's a must-see. You're going to learn a lot about a lot of programming that you didn't know happened. And Christine was chosen by DDS to revamp self-determination to make it more implementable. And when I started my journey, I called Christine and I said, Christine, how do I get started on all this? And she gave me a very collapsed version of probably the presentation she's going to give today. But she was instrumental in really making self-determination more accessible. And I'm looking forward to hearing from her. After Christine is done, we're going to hear from Melissa Jones. Melissa Jones, you have a team that's working with you on implementing self-determination. There's a financial team that helps pay the bills. It's your financial management service. And you have something called an independent facilitator who helps you do the planning and kind of helps you working through the complexity of implementing self-determination. And Melissa Jones has been working with Josh and myself for, I guess, about 18 months or so on our journey. And she's going to kind of help you understand how it all works after Christine is done. Christine's going to speak. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I'll interrupt her if it makes sense, and we'll have plenty of time, I think, for questions. And with that, Christine, go ahead. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Judy, and hi, everybody. The pressure is on with the recording, so I feel like I should do a disclaimer. that this truly is going to be high level and really oriented for discussion and Q&A tonight. But I am really happy to be here. So as Judy mentioned, I'm Christine Tolbert. I'm with the State Council on Developmental Disabilities. I am the Self-Determination Program Manager. And gosh, Judy, you were very eloquent in my appointment. But we are, I guess I was chosen by State Council to be the lead manager for this contract with DDS. So we have a really great partnership there, and work closely with that self-determination program team on the DDS side as well for this. But we have been using, sorry, I just looked at the chat and it said use. We have been implementing statewide self-determination program orientations since July of 2022. So we're hitting that 2-year mark where we have been really trying to improve access to the self-determination program. And I actually recognize some of your names. So it's good to see you again. We are doing this as a state council. We are doing this statewide, as I mentioned. We are primarily doing it by Zoom. We find that people have a lot of plates to spin on any given day. And while we know there's, of course, some value in doing things in person and in small groups, we find that one more training is really hard to pull off in person. And so we are finding that access via Zoom, we're running them at all different days and times and the evenings. We are really trying to meet the needs the best that we can statewide. The other thing to note is that we're offering them in lots of different languages. So maybe what I can start by doing before I go into all the data, I'm going to share a screen and just show you where you can register and just a little bit about where to find resources. And then I'll give you a really high level overview. So this is our website, and I will pop the link into the chat if you give me just a second. There you go. And as you can see here, we have a calendar at the very bottom. There's our calendar. There's our July calendar. Tells you what language it's being offered in primarily. And then we also offer it. We offer it every month in English and Spanish. And then we are rolling through these languages on a flow basis based on demand and need. We have Chinese, Tagalog, Korean, Hmong, Armenian, Farsi or Persian, and Arabic, in addition to English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. So for the materials, it is not a surprise. We really want people to have the information as often as they would like to access it. So all of the information that's shared, including the PowerPoint for the orientation, is right here on the right-hand corner of our website. So it says the orientation handouts. There are some resources, steps to enrollment, and service definitions. And I guess I can share those actually. And those are, again, listed or available in all of these other languages. So if you're interested in accessing them in simplified Chinese, you can just click on this button and it will take you to all the materials and the handouts. Same thing for Vietnamese. If I click on this top Vietnamese link, it'll take you to our Vietnamese page with the materials there on the right side. So we're really trying to make this accessible to anybody interested. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And I want to respect everyone's time. So I don't want to give you kind of a program orientation and then make you come back for 2 more hours. So I am just going to give you the high level tidbits. about the program. So the self-determination program itself is available to anybody who has regional center eligibility, specifically for those of you with Lanterman Act eligibility. So what that means is generally, there's a few exceptions out there, but generally for those that are ages 3 on up, if you are receiving regional center services, you would generally be receiving those Lanterman Act eligibility services, and you would be eligible to enroll in the program. The program itself is a outside of the box way of being able to access your services and supports from your regional center. Okay, so the expectation, just as in the traditional model, is that you still access all of those, what we call generic resources first. So that stays the same in self-determination. Judy mentioned that a little bit with her son, in that she's accessing healthcare resources. She's accessing some of those public benefits. Those are still, you're still accessing those from other entities, okay? The self-determination program is specific to your regional center funding and the services that you would normally be getting through your traditional model regional center. And then this neat thing happens. Once you get your budget certified by your regional center, then you are able to kind of shift a little bit and access services and supports that are not necessarily available to you through your regional center and regional center vendors. And that is truly the beauty of self-determination, where you can access and hire staff directly. You can negotiate their wages and their hours as long as you stay under budget. You can explore new services as long as they're covered by the program. So there are certainly some guardrails with the program. There are federal and state requirements, so it's not a free-for-all, but I will say that the freedom and the flexibility is very much true. I'm going to share my screen again just one more time, because I want to, if you're going to become familiar with some of the programs that are available, services in this program. I'm opening it, it's taking a minute. There we go. Can you guys see the service definitions? I can't tell. Let's see.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. So this is, it's a 27-page document. Okay, so I am not going to screen share this for long. Again, this lives on our website, but if you're interested in knowing the kinds of services and supports that you could access in self-determination to help you with your IPP goals, this 27-page document is your friend. Okay, it is alphabetized in English. It is a searchable document. If you know how to search a PDF, you can kind of start to search for some keywords. But I tell people, if you're the one that does midnight reading, this is the thing I would add and star to your Google Drive, so that you can just become familiar with it. As you can see here, acupuncture services could be covered in self-determination, behavioral intervention services, chiropractic, the list goes on all the way down. I'm going to highlight a few that people don't normally know about. Let's see, crisis intervention and support. Let's see, massage is in here if I go to M. Oh, homemaker. Judy mentioned homemaker services. Let me get down to massage. There it is. And it goes all the way down to vehicle modifications. Oh, living caregiver. All the way down to vehicle modifications and adaptations. Okay, so inevitably in these sessions, everyone wants to know all the different things that can be covered. Those are going to be really individualized based on your IPP. The beautiful thing about self-determination in the program right now is that if you're wanting to get started, you would come to an orientation and you would get your certificate. Then you can start to move through the enrollment process really your first step would be person-centered planning. And I'm not going to belabor that. I'm going to let Melissa, I won't steal your thunder, Melissa, on person-centered planning, but person-centered planning is really your foundational planning for self-determination. And your regional center will pay for you to hire a professional to help you with that planning process. And that, I would say, is really the beginning process to unlocking your needs, to unlocking the services that might be available in your area, to unlocking future planning, and to really unlocking someone's strengths. So, and that is paid by your regional center for you to kind of get started. Let me think. That's kind of the high level, really high level. I'm going to leave it to Melissa, who is an independent facilitator, to share some of her tips and tricks and her guidance from the independent facilitator perspective. But there are a lot of places you can go for help. There are a lot of resources that are online. They're on the DDS website. They're on the state council website. The materials are publicly available and they will continue to be. We want you to have the information that you need when you need it. So I want to share just a little bit about what we've been doing in the last couple of years. Let me pull it up really quick here. I don't know why I lost it, but I did.
And just so you know, before Christine started, orientation was 8 hours. And
this is 2.
Brought it down to 2. And it's very user friendly. And all the materials are online. So my journey starts with signing up for orientation. Once you go through orientation, then you know enough. You're going to get kind of a feeling for it. This is more like the travel log versus packing for your trip, you know. So once you go through orientation, that's when you're going to learn all the steps you need to do and how it all works. And then you need to find an independent facilitator and start working on your person-centered plan. So that's kind of where you start. And all the tools that Christine shared, those you're taught about those in the orientation. Is that right, Christine?
Absolutely. We make sure that we share with you where you can find the resources before we even get started. We include links in the chat if you're one that likes to go do that. Well, if you like to multitask. And then when we send you your certificate, we also include more of a curated list of the resources that we share in the orientation itself. So we like to say that really you're never alone. There's a lot of places you can go to get the information. And we also, full disclosure, Judy's right. It used to be either 4 or 8 hours, depending on where you went to the orientation. It's 2, but it's a packed 2. So we know that it's a lot of information in that amount of time. And that is, again, why we offer ourselves as resources. And we will also warm hand off and point you as to all the different places you can go. The great thing is the program has changed so much over the years in terms of being able to access certain resources, and also the regional center really paying for, you know, those pre-enrollment supports. So I just want to share a little bit about what we've done. This is kind of an update in data starting from July of 2022. This one is going through May. But we have done a total of 236 training sessions. All of them are listed. The number of training sessions that we've done are listed there on this line: 148 in English, 74 in Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Tagalog, Korean, and then 1 each in the Armenian, Arabic, Hmong, Farsi, and ASL. The other thing to note is that when we conduct our Spanish orientations, they are done by a native Spanish speaker in Spanish without an interpreter. Our project update is almost 5,500 people. It's actually over 5,500 people because that happened in June. That is how many people are waiting in the wings to be able to potentially enroll in the program. So that is really exciting to us. We're trying to really unbottleneck that first required step through these orientations. And you can see the number of folks in the different respective languages. About 75% of who's attending our sessions are family members. 10% are self-advocates, and then about 15% are professionals. And then ethnicity, these are, of course, voluntary survey information. About 21% of those attending, we're not sure. But 30% of those who are volunteering this information are identified as white and Caucasian. 14% are Asian or Pacific Islander. 19% are from Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community. 7% are Black African American, and 10% are identifying as other, which is also multi-ethnic. 91% are finding the information useful. So that's a really good thing, right? We know that there is improvement, there's flow improvement that could happen. The terminology has certainly changed since this particular PowerPoint has been, promoted and translated. I will tell you this, that DDS, in collaboration with us, of course, is updating the PowerPoint itself so that it can reflect the most current terminology that is happening in self-determination in terms of trying to enroll and understanding, what to ask for. Sometimes you just need to know those words, right? So that is currently being updated, and I would expect that in the next couple of months, the PowerPoint that we roll out and share out and train and also translate will in fact be updated. So stay tuned for that. And then those that are after the session, the voluntary survey, ask them if they're planning on enrolling, right? At least that initial touch point right after the 2-hour session. 76% are saying yes. 19% are still thinking about it. That is very much fair, given the complexities of getting enrolled, the responsibilities that you're taking on in self-determination. 2% are saying, nope, this was not for me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that maybe the information is, we need to make it a little more accessible at times. And then I also accept the fact that folks are saying, nope, this is not it, right? What I'm doing is working, and self-determination is not for me. We know that it's not for everyone. It is 100% an option. And so that's good data is what we like to call that. And then 3% are already enrolled. So we absolutely have folks that are coming back through who are already in the program that are learning. They're wanting to learn a little bit more about the program, or they're wanting to see how things have changed. They're wanting to maybe meet people and connect with others. So 3% of those that are attending are already enrolled in the program. We have additional training modules coming. So we have been hesitant and wanting to roll out these additional modules, but we just haven't been able to roll them out fully to the community. They are beyond the orientation. So there are going to be additional modules that cover person-centered planning. They cover how do you form the budget and negotiate the budget? How do you build a spending plan? In self-determination, how do I arrange for services? And then what do some of those resources and next steps look like, right? So those are going to be rolled out in additional optional training modules. But we're hoping that as we are rolling those out, in English, Spanish, and those other languages that are posted on our website, that we're able to kind of, again, further unbottleneck some of that general information statewide to help folks with their enrollment process. And we're hoping that that will not only help the understanding, but it will also help speed up that process a little bit for folks. I am available and willing to connect with individual training, to do a targeted group or parent groups, languages. If you have specific requests, we are truly there to try to best meet the needs and improve access into the program.
So Christine, there was a question about, I know you have a view through orientation. Do you have a view after orientation in terms of the number of people that go on to, or what percentage of people actually go on to implement self-determination?
That's a great question. We are just, we are renewing our contract with DDS, and our scope of work has changed a little bit, of course, to include those additional modules and to start collecting some post-survey data from folks that have been through the sessions to find out where they are in the process. Did they go on? Are they enrolled? What was the experience like at each step of the process? So that is new. That we'll starting to gather that data in, let's see, July, August, September, October will be our first kind of data point for that information.
Okay,
so
great.
We will be, of course, very excited to report out on what that looks like. And honestly, that helps us as the state council, and it helps us as folks that are self-determination program stakeholders. It's going to help us to be able to identify those problem points, right? Based on people's experiences, based on the timelines. And I'm hoping that that will really open it up for more improvement in the program itself.
Okay.
I'm seeing questions in the chat too about, can parents attend? Absolutely. Absolutely. And we have some frequent flyers. We have folks that have come back through lots of times because we know it's a lot of information. And if you're coming back frequently, the more you hear it, maybe you're hearing different co-trainers share their experiences that are different. All of that information can help you in your process. So we welcome what I call frequent flyers or our fans. But yes, anyone can attend. Parents, persons served by the regional center, family members, we have care providers, we have interest vendors, we have people that are interested in serving folks in self-determination that are not vendors. So that was captured in that data that I shared earlier. A parent can attend.
Someone asked if you had to be a regional center client. So I guess you don't have to if people that are thinking about being a vendor or supporting someone are attending.
Right. So the person that enrolls in the program does need to be with regional center, and they do need to have Lanterman Act eligibility. Yes.
Okay.
But for those that are serving, supporting self-determination, participants, no, the beauty is that you don't need to be a vendor, and you don't need to only use vendors in this program.
Yeah. So, we're doing this off the cuff here. We could maybe go on to Melissa and then open it up for questions, or do you want to take questions now? You can answer some questions in the chat while
sure.
we.
I can do
Melissa,
that.
how long do you think you'll be in terms of speaking? Where are you, Melissa? There you are. Oh, you're on mute now.
Okay. I don't know, maybe 15 minutes.
Okay, so why don't we let Melissa kind of give you the insider's scoop as an independent facilitator, and she can explain her role. And then we'll just have an open discussion and you can ask all of us questions. But you can still use the chat in the meantime. Okay, Melissa.
I'm up.
You're up.
Okay, just a little bit of background on me. I have a daughter who is just turned 34. there was a lottery a while ago, like 7 or 8 years ago, and she was selected to be part of the lottery. So we were kind of the guinea pigs. So she has actually been in self-determination for 5.5 years. It'll be 6 in December. So I taught myself. She was my first client. And then I went to a training at State Council to be an independent facilitator. And to be honest with you, after that training, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not ready to help other people yet. But I did some other training. Autism Society of Los Angeles did one. I did one through Guidelight Group, and I thought, okay, I'm ready to help others. And I've probably helped way over 100 clients get into the self-determination program. Yes, person-centered plan is your first step. Really, orientation is your first step. Finding an independent facilitator, not required, but I don't know why somebody wouldn't use somebody, because we're free. We're providing free service to get you started in self-determination. Person-centered plan is really a positive report. What do they like? What do they not like? What are their hopes and dreams? How best to support them. But really the goals is what drives the budget. The client needs to learn how to cook. The client wants to get into shape and wants to exercise. The goals is what drives the budget. Then we present that person-centered plan, the family, the client, to the service coordinator and the service coordinator supervisor, and that results in a budget. Your budget is based on traditional services. So that list that she provided you is wonderful, but a lot of people look at that list and think, oh, I can go to the regional center and ask for acupuncture. No, that's what you can do after you're in self-determination. So your budget is still based on traditional services. You receive your budget, and that's when you do the spending plan. And the spending plan is where you itemize how you're going to spend that money. So the budget's based on traditional services. The spending plan is where you get to itemize those fun things like your cell phone, your personal trainer, you're hiring a cook, all those things that Judy mentioned. There is a financial management company. A lot of parents say to me, oh my gosh, am I hiring the people? Am I paying the people? No, 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 no. There is a financial management company that does all that. I kind of think of them as payroll and HR. And then you get started in self-determination. It takes a lot longer than it should. It really shouldn't take that long, but it seems to take several months before you can get the budget and do the exciting stuff. It is a fairly new program. There's a lot of new directives that come out constantly from the Department of Developmental Services, which is over the regional centers. And so it's helpful to have an independent facilitator that's up to date on those directives because they're constantly coming out with new directives all the time. There is a list of independent facilitators. I wish I had the link. Maybe Christine somehow has that link, but there is a list of independent facilitators. You cannot use your money for housing, food, or entertainment. I just talked to a family earlier that at one point earlier today that was at some point connected with this group, and housing seems to be a big issue with the family, you know, paying for, the young man doesn't have Section 8 yet, and so rent is very expensive in Orange County. And unfortunately, you cannot use your money to pay for your apartment. That's really the basis of self-determination. Orientation, find an independent facilitator, provide the feedback for the person-centered plan, which is not required, but recommended. You present that to the regional center. Regional center gives you a budget, and then the fun stuff happens where you get to write your person-centered plan. Your spending plan and itemize how you want to spend the money. And the financial management service is the company that helps pay the payroll. You're going to join the YMCA. You have money in your budget to pay for the YMCA, but how are you going to pay for it? And that's where the FMS comes in. But it's a very, very exciting program, and it really allows you to be very creative with your budget. We love it. Like I said, we've been doing it for almost 6 years now. And it's a great program. So questions, there you go. She has
There
the
we
list
go.
of the Independent Facilitator resource.
So why don't we open it up now and raise your hand? I'm going to spotlight all of us here. Participants. Spotlight Melissa and spotlight Christine. And I can spotlight me. And there we go. Now we're all set. So Martin has his hand up. So Martin, what's your question?
Well, I just want to let the women know that I've been to YMCA at New Horizons before, like about 6 years ago, which was 2018. Well, even though I'm part of the disability organization, I didn't officially bonded with other disabilities, like one with Down syndrome, one with cerebral palsy, and one with other disabilities, because sometimes they act strange. They can act very unintelligent, and they talk very, very slowly and weirdly, which I tried to socialize, but it didn't work for me. Is it okay if I go to other autistic people for socialization?
That is a really good example, Martin, of the standard regional center vendors are designed for a certain community per se. And that's not necessarily the community that you feel comfortable with or that you want to be associating with. And so through self-determination, you have more freedom of what kinds of programming or what kinds of group. And Christine's nodding. You want to kind of add to that, because they're actually encouraging that as well, a broader, more diverse population.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Martin, you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the fact that you don't necessarily feel like your services and supports kind of the list of existing services, right, aren't necessarily working for you. You don't feel like it's a match or a fit. We hear that a lot at the orientations, and we find that because you can, you could hire a social coach and connector. You could hire someone to help you connect with, groups and social groups and, whatever it is that you like to do with your time. I don't know what your interests are, but we find that folks will hire what they call a social coach and a connector, right? Someone that is, they're comfortable with, and it's somebody that maybe engages in and enjoys the same kinds of activities that you would, right? And then help you get connected to groups that are, and it doesn't have to be disability specific, right? I mean, I think the goal of self-determination is to be as involved in your local broader community as much as you are interested in, right? That it doesn't have to be a disability specific type service. It can be support for you to go and engage with everyone else. And so that is very much a focus of self-determination. And, you know, I like to tell people, I like Costco, right? But there's usually only a couple of choices. You know, you have 2 or 3 choices of mayonnaise, you know, you better pick one. With self-determination, of course, there are some rules and regulations and guidance, but with self-determination, it really does kind of unlock
Oh, you're supposed to raise your
so
hand.
many options and choices.
Like this
And-
guy just spoke.
And that is where
Yeah.
having a social coach or connector, having an independent
raise your hand.
facilitator, having someone to help you find all of those resources that work for you in your day-to-day life. That is where that extra step, I think, is needed. And it's also incredibly helpful. And Melissa, I am 100% with you. I tell folks, listen, Regional Center will pay for you to have your first person-centered plan, right? Why wouldn't you? Regional
Right.
Center will pay for you to hire what they're calling pre-enrollment transition supports, but it's essentially an independent facilitator to help get you prepared and started and help you get those services, you know, kind of ready to go when you're ready to start. So all of that is available to you. And to your point, Martin, to help you to best engage in your local community with the group and with the folks that make you feel and help you move toward your goals.
Okay, thanks.
And, you know, a lot of people that service our community are looking to leverage your self-determination money to provide you services. So you may hear Jeremy Hamburg from My Best Social Life or the Spectrum Labs, who offers acting classes, or, you know, a variety of organizations like Zabacon become, they don't have to become regional center vendor, but they do a lot of times work with your financial management services company to become a vendor to them, and then they can pay them. And so, for example, for me, when Josh needed a trainer, we found one person and we got her vendored, but it wasn't working out. So we called our friend, one of his best friends, who was also on self-determination, who had a trainer who was coming to Irvine. And so they were already vendored. And so we just needed to just switch to them. We didn't have to go through regional center, and boom, now Josh has a trainer that is more appropriate for him in terms of geography and what his needs are. So what we're seeing is that as more and more of us participate in self-determination, it makes it easier for the rest of us to find people who, you know, like, let's say somebody has a decluttering need like Josh. Well, Nancy Collins is now set up as someone who can work with you. And so
Uh-oh, Judy, we lost you.
Chester.
I know it happens.
We lost you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, what Judy's, you know, speaking about is the ability to be able to truly access your local community for services and supports, right? Nope, you're back. Good.
And
There's a term
Okay.
with regional center called HCBS, which doesn't make any sense, but it's home and community-based services. A couple years ago, Governor Newsom told all the regional centers that they should start paying for social rec again. We haven't paid for social rec in, I don't know, 20 years. But everything that the regional center clients want to participate in has to be in the community. They won't pay for a special needs soccer team. They won't pay for that. They want it to be a class, something in the community, whether it's joining LA Fitness, that's in the community, joining the YMCA, having a personal trainer, finding an art class, finding a hiking club. They want it to be in the community with typical peers, if you want to use that term. That's a requirement. Everything in self-determination has to be that. And everything, even in traditional services, is supposed to be that.
Yeah,
So-
and we do go over that in the orientation. So we give
Yeah.
some examples, you know, if the word salad is, I know we're throwing out FMS, let's see, HCBS, let's see, what else have we thrown out tonight?
So-
Person-centered planning.
But kind of just
So
think of it as
Christine,
inclusive.
I have a question, and I probably should do it with you offline.
That's
But
all
how
right.
about OCASG? People participate in activities with us. Would they be able to have us as a service that they participate in? You know, they go to events, there's social skills training, there's a lot of activities that help them. Is that something that could be paid for through self-determination dollars?
I am going to put a link in the chat. If there are questions about whether something is what we call HCBS compliant,
Okay.
which means it's, you know, it's accessible, it's fully inclusive. I am going to drop it in the chat. It's on the DDS website, and there is a provider assessment, a self-assessment on that website page. And you can go through and you can answer the questions in terms of where the program is offered, who participates, and it will take you through a long list of questions to be able to determine if a program is compliant. So that would be, I mean, your regional center can generally give you a pretty quick answer for most services, but if it's something new, I just refer people to that website so they can get familiar with the expectations.
Oftentimes regional centers just going to Google it, but they do have people that sometimes go visit the program.
Mhm.
I see a couple questions on what is the most I don't know if popular was the right word, but frequently used FMS.
That must have come straight to you. I didn't get that one.
I'm not going to say any names, but there was an FMS that we all used a lot in the beginning. And I think that they have overcommitted themselves. And so their customer service is horrendous.
We've been using Mainzel, and I've been really happy with them.
They're not accepting anybody new. So don't
Oh, okay.
don't jump on that.
Oh, so I can't talk about them.
No.
It looks like Sandra has a question.
Sure.
Sandra, you want to take yourself off mute?
And while she's doing that, I did put a link to the FMSs. So if people want to, you know, do a little research, they can.
Yeah, but it really depends on what you need from the FMS. That's
Right.
really, really true.
And Melissa, before we get to Sandra's question, I have been in the orientation. I tell folks, I know the FMS world is hard to navigate, even when you know the system really well. I let folks know that once they choose their person-centered planner, you know, and or the person that's going to help them transition, paid by the regional center, I let them know that that person knows the ins and outs of the area and
Definitely.
the FMSs, and to kind of let them help guide you as to which FMS is probably, or few FMSs are going to be a good match. So
I'll give you a great example.
Great
example. Some people put Uber on their spending plan. They don't drive, they don't have a car, and they use Uber for transportation. And I'm trying not to throw anybody under the bus, but I'm just being honest.
No pun intended.
There is an FMS in Orange County called Sequoia. And I use them a lot. They're right here in Orange County. I think a lot of parents like that. They can't seem to get Uber to work for them. That's just the honest truth. you can get Uber gift cards, but face it, you can order Uber Eats with an Uber gift card, and you can't pay for food in self-determination. You could sell your Uber gift card to your neighbor. Not cool, but you could. And so Sequoia can't seem to figure out how to make that work. And so I had to have a family. Their son works at Disneyland, and he uses Uber to get back and forth to work. He works there 6 days a week. And we had to change FMSs because Sequoia could not figure out how to make Uber work. So it's not who's the best FMS, who's the most popular FMS, who's, you know, I know who probably has the most clients, but I also know their customer service is horrendous. And when you call, you're going to be on hold for 45 minutes. And then the person that answers is going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. So it's what services are you going to need and which FMS can help you with that? That's just the honest truth. I also saw a question, and I know this lady wanted to answer, but there was another question about something about hiring friends. That was up a little bit. If the client is an adult, they can hire their parents, which I don't necessarily recommend, but they can. But they can also, Tim Ginn, who's a very popular speaker in Orange County, he talks about going to a concert. Now, to be honest with you, Tim has cerebral palsy, so he needs help in the restroom and all that. And he talks about having his staff go to a concert with him. And the staff was so bored. They're like, oh my God, when is this thing going to be over? They didn't like the music. They had no desire to be at that concert. But he could find somebody who was liked the same kind of music that he liked. And that could be his staff that went to the concert with him, because he needs somebody to go with him. He needs somebody to help him in the restroom. He needs some transportation, on and on and on. So you can really fine tune. Like Tim loves the fact that one of his staff is a fabulous cook. And that's one of the reasons Tim has cerebral palsy. It's not safe for him to cook. Like he would burn the house down. But he can find somebody that loves to cook and is a really good cook. Find somebody that loves art, loves dance, loves this hiking, loves the same things that you like. And then, yes, you can hire those people to be your support staff.
Okay, Sandra, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. And I am so glad that this meeting is being offered. My name is Sandra, and my son is a regional center client and participates in self-determination, and we're entering our 4th year. So, or he's entering his 4th year, I should say. And I love, Judy, what you were talking about, how you strategized when you were going to, and your son was going to start the self-determination program because of the circumstances of what was going on with his PIP. And that's one of the things that we're finding as we go along is strategizing his plan from year to year to meet the needs that he has. The other thing that I want to encourage everybody on here who's considering going into self-determination is you don't have to get it all right in the first year. You don't have to have everything in there. So when my son was first getting into the self-determination program, part of why we did it is the geographic area we live in is really remote and there's nothing for grownups. And it was COVID. So he basically went into the self-determination program with his traditional services. And we were fortunate that his employment support was willing to participate in the self-determination program with him because they don't have to. So, and that's all he had. And we had a year to kind of see how this feels, and working with the FMS that we were with, that we're still with, and we're switching because his needs are changing. So, you have all the time in the world to get stuff figured out and get your foundation laid. For us in our community, there are lots of people that we've hired as his support and help that were his friends. Of course, when you hire these people and you're working with an FMS, there's all kinds of their things that they like the life scan and the background check and, you know, a job application. Even though you've hired them, they want all that paperwork, and making sure that you can afford this person in your spending plan, or people, or those helpers are his personal trainer is the local gym owner. One of his community integration coaches is a speech therapist who is part of that community integration, is helping my son with speaking. And so you get to be creative about how you find you want your needs to be met. So one of the things I do want to say about the FMS is your FMS has to be vendored to provide services with your regional center. So depending on your regional center, you might be limited with which FMS you get to work with. The other thing to know is, you know, as we were, you know, every year as we were coming into rolling over into his new year, we'd be like, do we want to switch FMSs? And there was nobody that was able to meet the need vendored with our regional center at the time. And so now we found an FMS that we want to work with, and they're willing to go through the process to be courtesy vendored with our regional center. So we have time to get all that done so we can make that move. And so it takes some planning, takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of figuring out which directive applies to you. And that's where your independent facilitator is really going to be your best friend, because they keep up with that stuff. As participants, you're required to have an idea of how all this stuff works. Your independent facilitator is the one who's going to really walk you through that process, because it's complicated. It's complicated. We got rules, we got things, you know, all of this rules and things is because it's government money we're spending, and they have rules about how we spend it. And, you know, once you figure out the freedom in those rules, you almost don't even see the rules anymore. So it's been a lifesaver, and it's founded on a law that gives you cradle to grave support. And as you figure out how to navigate the system and get it set up to meet those needs, you're really going to fully much more benefit from this program that you get to design on your own. That's really all I wanted to say.
Sandra, thank you so much. I want to kind of share a couple things that you mentioned. First, I wanted to share that with Melissa and I, we worked a lot together on the planning part and the spending part. She would look over my plan and say, this will work, this won't work, and coach me. And at different junctions, I would get her advice and say, hey, I want to change the budget. What do I do? And she was always there and available to me. I wanted to kind of explain the FMS and how I interact with them, just so you can kind of feel for it.
It's so different with Mainzel, but go ahead.
Well, okay, everyone is different. This is a case study. Okay.
No.
So there are some people who work for us as kind of a contractor. They're their own business. Maybe they have their own independent, you know, they don't use their Social Security. They have a tax ID number.
Yeah.
And for them, they will send me invoices. I approve them, and then and those invoices need to be in have a particular information that the FMS requires. And then I approve them, and then they're paid for by the FMS. So for example, today our trainer sent an invoice, I approved it, and I sent it to the FMS. The FMS said, oh no, you didn't put the right information. He needs to reissue it. That's kind of, but others, it just goes smoothly. So that's one group. The second group are employees. So those are people that you pay them with your Social Security. For me, it's just my brother who helps Josh with his cooking classes. He is an employee of Josh, and they went through the process of setting Josh up to be his employer. All the they'll take care of the taxes and such. They have a timesheet system. My brother feels similar to if you're in a PIP and you fill out a timesheet. So you fill out the timesheet, I approve the timesheet, and then they do the payroll. So that's like a second type of payment that we have. Then a third type is is almost like they're going to buy something for you that's in the budget, but they're going to spend it. So that organization isn't necessarily vendored with them. They're not an employee, but they're a company that they're going to pay. So the way I do that is, an example of that is Cox Communication, T-Mobile, in which case I have to give them the invoice, and they go through the process of paying the invoice online. And it's kind of complicated, but, and then you can also provide them with something that you want to buy that needs to be in the budget, and then they will order it and purchase it. So those are all,
yeah.
So those are all the different kinds of ways that I interact with the FMS to pay for things. I don't, everything, it's a learning curve. So Sandra, I think, did a really good job of kind of explaining that, you learn how it works, and you kind of say, okay, this is how this works. This is how that works. There was like one person I worked with during the first month. She kind of onboards us. And now I have a regular person, and you kind of develop a relationship with them, and you all learn how to work with them. But it's all pretty, they have a timeline for when they pay people. It's, so if it's a certain size invoice, it's paid in this many days. And if it's this size invoice, it's paid in this many weeks. So everything's very clear and consistent. So it gives you a real sense of that you're not, that things are going to be handled in a timely fashion.
Right. So Judy, what you're describing with how the FMS and the different payments with the 1099, the independent contractor, and then the hourly people and stuff. There was directive released not too long ago that pretty much standardized that for all the FMSs. So what you're describing with, oh, that invoice isn't right, I can't tell you how many times I've smacked myself in the head. Oh, why didn't I catch that? Because most of the FMSs are requiring that either the participant or their family submit the invoices for the vendors, because then there's less squabble of, wait, I didn't know that they were billing that. So it also kind of gives the family the, what's the word I want, accountability of knowing how their money is being spent. So, so that's pretty standardized. Up until this year, it was really, really difficult for people with bigger budgets and people with higher medical needs to find an FMS to work with. But that kind of got resolved between Regional Center and the FMSs. And so it's a little bit easier to find FMSs that are willing to take bigger budgets. And so that kind of speaks to also finding the FMS is going to meet your need. So just because they're a big name and a popular and everybody likes them doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be able to meet your specific need. So you're going to have to interview them. And I'll dig up good questions about what to ask the FMS, what to ask the independent facilitator when you're starting this journey, because, it's all about relationships. Like you said, Judy, you have a relationship with your person now, and And that's going to be what makes the whole thing keep going and growing, is the relationships that we develop within the self-determination community.
I'm going to
Okay,
jump
that
in
makes
here
Yeah, go, Melissa.
with the FMSs. There's 3 FMSs, GT Independence, Aviana, and Mainzel. You can't even talk to them now, at this point, until you have your budget and your spending plan. They want to set up a meeting where they look over your budget, look over your spending plan, and kind of go over those things that we're talking about. Like, oh, yeah, no, we wouldn't be able to pay your T-Mobile bill. We don't do that. We could, but unfortunately you can't call them like now. You can't start interviewing them now. So it's another reason why you need an independent facilitator that kind of knows a little bit about each one and what the pros and cons are.
Yeah.
So
Melissa did that for me, and she would give me a heads up about how to apply and when we should apply and how we should manage it. So it really helped having an independent facilitator. I see that Ivan has a question. So Ivan, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, so it was regarding what I put in the chat earlier, since I know you mentioned that we can't use our money for housing specifically, but I've seen in the PDF of the services, there's things like community living or housing transition, was it? So I was a little curious on how something like that would work specifically.
Christine, is that something you're familiar with?
You know what? I'm so sorry.
I'll answer.
I didn't hear all of, but
Okay,
I'm also ready to prepare the answer to your first question, Ivan, about what services can't be covered. So I'll go after you, Melissa.
So independent living and supported living are kind of similar. There's a little bit of difference between the two, but it's basically providing staff to either help you learn how to do it or do it for you. But they can teach you how to cook, how to pay your bills, how to manage your money. So they're assisting with all those kind of things. If you live independently and you get a letter from Social Security saying you've overspent, that would be something that team would assist with. Those are traditional terms. So most people qualify for independent living or supported living. But what I always say is my staff that work with my daughter wear many hats. One day they're the job coach. The next day they're providing independent living. And the next day they're driving her to her personal trainer. So I call them a support staff. Regional center would call them 3 different things. They would call it a personal assistant, independent living, and a job coach. I call them one thing because she wears, I have somebody that can meet the needs of my daughter in a variety of different ways. But yes, independent living and supported living assist with learning and or doing those things for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa. And then Ivan, you had also asked what kinds of things are not covered under the program. There's some directives that list things that are not.
There is.
Yeah, they're out there. What I can say is that the services that are supposed to be paid by other agencies are something that you would have to get from other agencies, right? So for example, if you had Department of Rehab in any way supporting employment, you would want to access those services first. And then the regional center may be able to come in and add sort of additional supports to that. Or Social Security benefits, school district services for those of you that have, young adults or children in school districts, those day services including some of those therapies, you would be expected to access them from that entity first, or from health insurance. So those generic resources is what we call them, right? That's really the same in both models, the traditional model and self-determination. But you tend to get a little more familiar with it, I think, in self-determination when you're trying to figure out what to spend that money on, what you can, what you can't. That's one start. I will say this, you cannot buy Disneyland tickets, folks.
Yeah.
So I don't know why that keeps it keeps rearing its head, but no Disneyland
Yeah.
tickets.
I
The
just say no entertainment.
Yeah, no entertainment. It's really the federal government needs to be sure that the money that is being spent is going to benefit the person that's in self-determination. So that's where things like subscription and other kinds of things like that can get a little bit tricky in trying to find out how can you guarantee that that person with a disability is in fact using and getting that service. So that's where, there can get some complexity depending on the kind of program. There's some other good questions in here. One of them was, how often are goals evaluated as the budget yearly? Great question. So just like with your annual IPP meeting with your regional center, you're at least checking in annually to see how you're doing toward those goals. And you're going to continue to do that. And then your budget is an annual budget. So just like when you're beginning to form and negotiate your starting budget with self-determination, you're going to be going through that process every year from one year.
There can also be change of circumstance.
Absolutely.
So that's a big term in self-determination, unmet needs and change of circumstance. I don't think I've ever talked to any parent that says, oh my gosh, I have all this. I mean, I'll ask somebody, do you have this service? Do you have that service? No, never know about it, knew nothing about it. And they think, oh, I must have the worst service coordinator ever. This is the same, whether you're at Harbor Regional Center of Orange County, you don't always know what all services that you have or that are out there.
And that's where a good independent facilitator is going to know your regional center's funding guidelines, the services and supports that could be available to you in the traditional model, right? Having someone that can help guide you through that discussion is really important in building your budget. There's a question from Joy about what if a particular vendor under HCBS is a one-time cooking class? Yeah, I would think that would work. Not everything in self-determination. I tell people this because my co-trainers offer all of their different services that they're getting. Not all of your self-determination line items, if you will, your spending plan are going to be big budget items. One of my co-trainers, used money to be able to buy a shower head, one of those flexible shower heads for the shower to help, with bathing. One of my co-trainers was able to purchase some specific for hearing impairment, some alarms for the home for safety. So those kinds of things are not big ticket items, and they're oftentimes just a one-time item. Those things can be added to a spending plan for 1 year, and you may not need it for the same thing the next year. You may be able to use that money for something else. So that is where you do your annual check-in. So keep that in mind. While staffing tends to be a larger item in your spending plan, you can, a computer, or I'm thinking file cabinets or ergonomic chair for employment. I mean, there's so many different options that could be in a spending plan. Yeah. And so they're not all these really, big ticket is what I call it, big ticket items. They can be small things too.
There's a very common term, regional center is the payer of last resort. That means you've already accessed the school, you've already accessed Department of Rehab, you've already accessed your health insurance. So even if you have $1 million in your budget, regional center's still gonna say, well, do you have a denial for your speech therapy from your insurance? Because you can't put it on there if you don't have that denial. So they still want to see that. When you see that list, there's a lot of medical stuff on there, chiropractor and I wanted a nutritionist, and I remember they said, "Did you go through your insurance?"
You have to use
So-
that first.
So there are a couple questions, Melissa, that you might want. Is there a cost for an independent facilitator?
My daughter's knocking on the door. To get started in self-determination, there is not a cost. Once you're in self-determination, if you need ongoing support, even if it's just for the year 2 budget and the year 2 spending plan. Some of my families really need a lot of hand holding, and some people I never talk to till we get to the next year. You're not really that involved with regional center anymore. You still have to do your annual meetings. The other thing I wanted to make sure that everybody realizes, you can use traditional services in self-determination. If you love your, I don't know, day program, you can stay there. You don't have, that's still on there, but I guess my daughter has an emergency, so let me.
Okay, go take
pause
care of
this,
this.
And
but
I'll continue with your thought, Melissa. I think you can still use vendors in self-determination. The thing to remember is that some vendors do not want to get paid through the financial management service provider, and that is a requirement. There's a question in there about, do you need to have an FMS? Yes. You cannot do this program without a vendored financial management service provider. They really are the hub, and they are also the entity that is going to be paying all of your self-determination bills. So very important. They are a key support. And some vendors, though, prefer to just sort of have that direct connect with the regional center. And they may not want to be paid by the financial management service provider for you or your loved one. So that is just something, while it is possible to access it, you would need to check with that vendor to see if they will support you in self-determination.
So
There's also a question here from Hunter, Judy.
yeah.
About receiving traditional services. Can you also participate with self-determination offerings? I think that was a little bit about what we just answered about how you can access regional center vendors and, you know, the broader community supports. But I think it's also important to clarify that you are either in the traditional model or you're in self-determination. So there's no gray area, right? You're going to be in traditional model, and there's actually two options under that model, and then self-determination. So you can't sort of use half regional center traditional and half self-determination. You have to either use them all in self-determination and get those vendors to work with you in that program, or you stay in the traditional model, right? Those are really your two main options. Maybe another time we can go into participant directed services, or you could just come to my orientation and you can learn about it. That is a what I call self-determination light, although I probably shouldn't say that. I'm being recorded. It's not really that, but it is a way for you to be able to access non-vendors in the traditional model. The thing is that it's only for certain services, and you are locked in, your provider is locked into that traditional vendor contract rate, whatever that is. So you have less flexibility, but it is then in self-determination, but you have a little more flexibility than you do in the traditional model. That is, it's called participant directed services.
It's kind of half and half.
It's half and half.
It is.
But you don't get to negotiate the rate, right? They're probably going to get minimum
Correct.
wage, and you're whatever the number of hours that the regional center says you get from that vendor, that's the number of hours. There's no like flow or negotiation in that regard.
So Christine, we've got a couple of questions. Jane is asking about housing arrangements. That really is outside the scope. That's a whole other session. In fact, we've had 2 sessions on housing, and let me just quickly share my screen and show you where you can see those recordings and watch those, because the last one that we had the head of housing for regional, actually I think we both had the head of housing for regional center, and he goes into all the details of what's available through regional center from a housing point of view, and it's very different from this whole self-determination. But if you go to our educational videos, this shows all the sessions we've had since COVID, and there are sessions on housing in here. So Jane, I recommend going there versus us trying to cover that in today's session. Then Deborah asks a question: do FMS pay slowly? Is that why some don't want to go through them? I'll just do it from a parent's perspective, and then Christine and Melissa, maybe you can add to it. My experience is that some of the vendors just don't want to deal with it. They get paid, they know when they get paid, they've kind of set up their whole world around it, and they're just not into creating a different payment plan. That's what it appears like as a parent when you go and talk to them.
I agree.
My experience with the FMS is that no, they don't pay slowly. They've been pretty responsive. I don't know if they're different. I know that like when we were dealing with GT Independent on PIPs, they were really awful. So I don't know if
there is a directive that says they're supposed to pay on a timely basis, but what does that mean? There again, depends on the FMS. When you're talking to them, that's a question. How quickly do you pay?
So Christine and Melissa, do you have a comment on why maybe some of the vendors who are vendored with Regional Center would not be accepting payment through self-determination?
Exactly what Christine put, paperwork and admin. I am so sorry, but I'm going to have to excuse myself, guys. But
Okay,
if you
Melissa.
put my email address in the chat, people feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for being with us. And Christine, are you needing to leave as well?
I'm okay. I'm okay for a few more minutes if there's any late questions. I also would say this. I think that because self-determination is still new-ish, right, in its current version in the state, there are a lot of vendors that are still learning about self-determination and the financial management services piece. So for a lot of vendors, it's still kind of the great unknown. And so understanding it, looking through that administrative piece, and I think it's just new, right? So I don't want to say it's always delays, it's always the paperwork, although I think that is true. I've absolutely heard that. I also think that the more that vendors understand self-determination and what that looks like on their end in terms of contracting, being able to have flexibility and rate flexibility, working with folks in self-determination, being able to kind of branch out as a vendor to support someone in new ways. I think that's all happening. It's all possible. And it's also, I think, down the road, the way of the future for a lot of vendors. We're just not there yet, right?
Yeah.
We're just not there.
Christine, I'll just kind of add on to about the payment. So this is an example of a main cell policy. If an invoice is under $500, they pay in 3 days. If an invoice is over $500, they pay in 3 weeks. So a lot of these services tend to be, in the thousands of dollars. So
Yeah.
it might seem slow. I don't know what it's like to get paid through regional center, but that might be it. It looks like Martin has a question. Martin, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah. I was told that I shouldn't overspend money when I'm using Lyft, the bus or the train if I want to go somewhere like that's not in Orange County and LA County, and it's not part of like the self-determination program. Why is that?
Uber and Lyft transportation can be a part of someone's self-determination spending plan.
Okay.
It can be. Yeah.
Who
I mean,
were
you have to
told
work
that
within your
by,
budget.
Martin?
You have to work within your budget, but it's absolutely a service that could be accessed in this program.
Okay. Thanks.
Sandra, you wanted to say something?
Hi, Sandra. I recognize your name.
So, yes. So about the payments, one of the things that just strikes everybody just like they're dumbfounded is with the FMSs and the payments, and even with regional center and the payments. And we don't see this when we're in the traditional model. We don't see this back end part. The payment is done after the service is rendered. So, except for your hourly people. So your 1099 people, specifically, they send you an invoice that gets sent at the end of the month. So if you have services up until the 31st of the month, you can't submit that invoice until after that service has been rendered. And then, depending on the size and the FMS and whatever, for the FMS I'm with, as long as I have my invoices in by the 10th of the month, they're going to get paid within a couple of weeks. If a person wants a paper check, it might take much longer. They encourage everybody to do the ACH. But the thing about the traditional service providers switching over to self-determination and participating in that part of the program. So the traditional service providers, what I learned with my son's employment support traditional service provider is it becomes a completely different tracking system for him when he's participating in self-determination. And it's become such a burden for them that I actually create their invoices every month for them for my son's participation in the program. Otherwise, they don't have the staff or the bandwidth to do it. So much so that they're like, if we have to do it, we're just going to walk away from the money because it's so much of a stressor for them to separate him from the other hundreds of people they serve that are served by the regional center, that they're just like, yeah, we can't separate and make invoices separate for him when everybody else we just shove into e-billing and we get paid. Even those traditional service providers get paid after services are rendered. So I just kind of wanted to make that clear, that's the rule across the board is paid in arrears. So for the person asking about the one-time baking class, call your FMS and find out how they would handle that, because a lot of times we don't find out about this baking class until pretty quickly before it happens. Is the person given the baking class going to want to actually go through the process of being, onboarded and being a 1099 and being paid in arrears? And how would they do that? Would they treat it like, going to class through the park district, and they can actually, figure out with your person giving the class and the FMS how that payment would be handled? Because like Christine said, there is no reimbursement. If you pay out of your pocket, you have paid out of your pocket. Nobody's paying you back.
I would think, Sandra, you would talk to your FMS ahead of time. You need to have had the budget set aside in the right category. in terms of planning. And that's like
Right.
one thing that is a little bit difficult in as you go through the year. All of a sudden you realize, oh, there's something I just heard about and I really want Josh to participate in it, and I haven't set aside budget appropriately for that.
Right.
it's
So
probably a learning curve thing.
it is.
Um,
It is. So like, for example, for this past year, we had X amount of dollars to take classes through the park district. And so if he found something that was, looked interesting to him, we would, say, oh, okay, this is going to be through the park district, and, make those arrangements so that the class could be paid for before it actually began. And our FMS was willing to do that. So, and the park district was clearly willing to do that, but it takes communication and planning and deciding like what's important. Is this fight worth it over here versus
an example of going through that. Somebody asked about budgeting, and Josh's computer died. It literally died. We saw it coming. His battery was swelling, and we knew it was going to die. And we hadn't said it, and he's a film editor, so he needed a computer to do his work. And I thought, let's move some of the FMS, the self-determination money, around into the technology place to pay for the computer. And it was a race between Regional Center and the computer dying, and the computer won. So, and the computer won because Regional Center, we got all these questions. Why did you pick this model? Why did you need this? How does this affect his plan? There was like all sorts of, and that was with the Regional Center because we were moving budget around. And in the end, and then like I put, well, I want him to have tech trackers to go in and install it and do all, get it all set up. But I wanted Geek Squad to cover, servicing it and, and it was like a whole interaction with them over every little thing. And in the end, the computer died, and it was clear we weren't going to get through Regional Center for another week or two. He could not live without his computer for that long. And we just, bought a computer. So that's an example that Sandra was saying where, I think it's like anything else. It's, it's life is a Milton Bradley game, and you learn how to play it better as you play it. And the same is true with self-determination. And, the problem was they wanted to know the exact model, exactly how much it was going to cost. And unless we had anticipated his computer was going to die that year, we would not have set aside budget for it. And so those are the kinds of things that can occur that you could have planned for, but we didn't. And what happens when you get put through that? And then you got to just decide, is it worth the fight or not? And in the end, we just decided we'll just keep things the same. I see Christine nodding, so that was like a.
Well, I think that this just speaks to the larger concerns, right? We know the program is amazing. It really does allow for freedom and flexibility, but it also, comes with responsibility and with, unfortunately, some of those administrative burdens, right? As you're trying to navigate, into the program and then from one year to the next. But I appreciate Sandra's perspective earlier where she just said, start with what you have, and it's a learning process. I mean, just like the traditional model, folks, right? I mean, there's a lot of services that maybe you didn't realize you could access that you can, like social rec that was shared earlier. I think that, when you're looking at self-determination, while these are very real, complex issues, try to compare what you think your self-determination life plan might be like versus what you're getting now from the traditional model. I always compare and contrast and see if this is a worthy battle, right, for you or your loved one, right? Judy, with all of this, would you still choose self-determination?
Yes, well, first of all, I think there's a timeliness in terms of the budget and the fact that Josh had been going through this program that was a tailored aid program that he wasn't going to continue with. So it was the right time to switch. And there are a lot of things I'm a software person, so I look at Josh 11.0, and there's still a lot of bugs in 11.0 that need to be fixed. And self-determination gives me a tool to address some of these issues, these things he needs to learn, these skills he needs to have to be successful in life. And so it's and it lets me do it in a way that he's in control of who he works with. I mean, there have been a lot of services that we've tried to do where he didn't like the person that was the regional center vendor, and maybe he didn't agree with their politics or didn't like something about him, and it wasn't successful. But here I can choose the right people to work with him on the right skills at the right time, and know that there are going to be some things that he's going to actually learn and not need that next year. And maybe next year, instead of spending money on employment or on his weight, I can spend it on doing my best social life, or some things that are focused on his social life more, or other things. So it really gives a lot of freedom to choose where you focus, who you focus with, and allows you some freedom to continue their journey to grow and be happier in life. So it's probably that was a lot. Anything else? Oh, Diane has a question. Yeah, Diane?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you. Thank you for the presentation tonight. And I missed some of this because I was making dinner for my son. Am I allowed to ask a personal question or no? I'll just shoot. I put it in the chat. Basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, my FMS won't pay over $500 to a gym. Anything over 500, they require a W-9, and the gym, in this case Equinox, refuses. I call this, corporate, to provide a W-9. So I'm trying to figure out how else we can skin this cat. We have $2,400 in the budget. Can the FMS, I thought, maybe waive this requirement? Okay, if not, then can they pay it in installments until that, $2,400 is used up? Like every month 500, and this way they won't need a W-9. Any insight? It seems like I'm butting heads with these.
I think
Have you heard of that before?
I mean, I've heard a lot about this, about memberships, and about somebody had an issue with a massage therapist last week. I think different FMSs are going to do that type of service differently. And I think if that is a big piece of the spending plan, or an important piece, or Equinox is in fact the only place, because of established relationships, or social connections, or location to the house, or, if there's no other alternative, then I think you're either probably going to need to do, find a different FMS for that service, down for the next year. You might have to shift. It's a pain. That's pain.
And any way around this, with your FMSs, do you hear this W-9 requirement for co-employer model?
Well, I know that some FMSs are getting rid of co-employer model entirely.
Yeah, I'm hearing that's nationwide.
Right. Yeah, it's not specific. I think a lot of the issues that we're finding, folks, are not, they're really related to the federal waiver. And the transparency and the cost of doing business with public dollars. Not all of the issues, right? I will tell you this. DDS has contracted with 2 entities to roll out independent facilitation certification standards. They are also contracting out with an agency who is going to be establishing and rolling out financial management service standards as well. So those things are coming to make things a little bit more streamlined and at least consistent on a foundational level. I know we're talking about the financial management services. It doesn't mean that each FMS is going to do things the same. They're all, private businesses, but that's coming. The issues that we're seeing that are probably more common and frequent are going to be coming with some certification and some standards and some best practices in terms of, how these policies and practices are implemented across the state. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Do you have an independent facilitator or?
Well, I went through I do, and I kind of maxed out the time with them. I'm also certified IFS. I'm also, a lawyer, and I always have found there are ways to do things. I've never seen any 2 companies not, I don't want to say flexible, that being Equinox, and I don't understand, are FMSs allowed to do with a gym maybe these maybe 4 installments at least to
Right. I think the issue, and again, each FMS kind of approaches this differently, but I think the bigger issue is, with a membership, if there's no guarantee, kind of like with a gift card, right? There's no guarantee that the person with the disability is in fact the one that's going to be receiving the service. So that's kind of a big piece of it. What I would say, have you reached out to the self-determination program ombudsperson?
Nope.
I'm going to put their link in the chat.
Thank you.
I strongly recommend, folks, the ombudsperson's office is there to capture all the problems and provide objective information. They are hearing they're hearing more of these case studies, right, that have kind of come up in here. They're getting that statewide, and they are then either able to help facilitate a solution to it. They are able to provide a clear response as to yes or no, this can or can't be done. And then if it's a bigger issue, which I know this issue about memberships and things like that keeps coming up, it is a problem. They are working with the department and or the legislature to make some improvements statewide. So if you haven't already checked in with their office, I think this would be a really helpful piece of information. They can capture the FMS that you're with. They can capture the specific issue and the specific amount, and that can go to help inform things. So I'm not saying if they're going to have a quick solution for you, but I really would recommend checking back
Diane,
in.
The experience I have is on the technology. So for first of all, you have the issue of paying everything in advance versus paying it monthly and after you've received the service. So that may be the problem. But I know that with Cox, they log in as my son and pay his invoice online. I fill out a form, I submit the invoice, I've given them detailed instructions on how they pay the bill. And every month I send, it's a little tedious, but I send them the invoice, say that it's approved, remind them, resend them the login instructions and how they do it, and send them a purchase form. and then they go in and they buy it. And I do that every month, and I do that with T-Mobile. T-Mobile has a guest payer feature, so instead of having to log in as Josh, they just need to know his phone number and account number, and then they can just pay it, and then that's how it gets paid. So I don't know if you can do the same thing with your gym, if they have a login and you can have it paid that way, but that's how I might work
we
around
have a
it.
log. Say it again. So
So like with our phone, we have a login. There's a login to pay the invoice. So they go in, so you put in a request for them to pay the invoice. It has to have been budgeted.
pay
you know.
who to pay who? The FMS to pay the
The FMS then pays the vendor.
Okay.
And that vendor isn't W-9, because I mean, they're a big company. They don't want to go through that process. So they pay it online. So that's how I do it.
Okay.
So is there a term for that, Christine? What's the 4-letter acronym?
There's a lot of those, Judy. Let's
know.
see.
I would ask your independent facilitator though. That's who should
I'm
be
not
helping
sure
with
what
that.
I don't have one,
you're talking
and
about. I'm sorry.
okay. Well, thank you for your help. Thank you both.
Okay.
Yeah, check in with the ombudsperson on your complex situation. They may be able to help you. They will also be able to let you know what they're hearing.
Okay.
You know, it may be an issue of needing to change FMSs, right?
And thank you for that creative thinking as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
pain.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Mary, do you have a question?
Yes, I was just wondering, how does anyone get Wi-Fi and cell phone covered under SDP?
Judy
So
just
it
gave
has
her
to be,
example.
yeah. Can you answer that, Christine, or I can say how we did it, but
I was gonna say, yeah, you just gave an example.
yeah. So it was under the service. Each item has a service code associated with it, which is a category. I don't quite remember what I could look at a spend. Hold on, let me bring up a spending plan and tell you what the category is.
And again, folks, I'm just going to say, we do go over this in the self-determination program orientation. We do offer you links to all of these different, I'll put the spending plan or the service code list in the chat while Judy is looking at her.
Yeah, so it's under the service code for technology supports. And so Josh needed technology supports, which is he needs his internet and cell phone for his work. So we put that in the budget and it was approved by the regional center. Has to be approved by them. And has to fit, there has to be a reason why how it fits with his person-centered plan.
Does it have to go through Department Rehab?
No, it's not DOR, it's regional center.
Okay, all right.
Now, you know, you might be able to get it covered through DOR, I suppose, but.
DOR wanted us to go to Lifeline and file an application, and then it's taken months to get an answer, and they want you to have your own phone number, and I don't know. I'm having my son take.
Lifeline should be kind of instant, but you can only get one or the other. You can only get with Lifeline, you can only get a cell phone or a home phone, or at least that's how it used to be. But I did include a link to the service codes in the chat for those of you that are interested in that. It tells you the different kinds of service codes that are available in this program.
Call from Josh.
Okay, so
I'm gonna head out in about 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's almost 9 o'clock, the witching hour. Thank you so much, Christine, for your time and for your assistance, and for all that you've done to improve this process, which she really has done a lot to help all of us. And thank you, everybody, for attending tonight's meeting. It's being recorded and it'll be up on our website. in, maybe by next week. I've got some things going on. So anyway, thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you at the next activity. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
Bye.
Nice
Thanks,
to see
Christine.
everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your questions and your patience.
Judy.
All right.
Yes,
Nice to see
thank
you, Judy.
you.
Take care.
Bye.
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 Good night. Bye.